Chapter 9, Singlehood and Cohabitation. Marriage in the U.S. seems to be an outdated concept. The number of people who are choosing to be single or cohabit is increasing every year. So this chapter looks at why Americans are choosing not to marry, the reason behind people choosing to be single, how being single varies across race and ethnicity. It also looks at why cohabitating has increased. And finally, it looks into some same-sex marriages and its controversies. Many singles are postponing marriage. For many young people today, they're pursuing a college education, preparing for a job and a career, and spending more time, in recreational activities like traveling before they get married. So there are historical exceptions. The present tendency is to delay marriage, and that's the norm, especially for men. So this all results in delaying or marrying late. The ideal age is 27 for men, and it's about 25 for women. And we'll see some more data in a slide or two. Also, there are some societal pressures that many face. People think something may be wrong with you if you choose to remain single. Singles face enormous pressure from society. People often ask over and over whether you're dating someone special, or parents pressure their children to get married and to give them grandkids. They often feel invisible, not being invited to social or family activities with other married couples, unless it's to be fixed up with someone of the couple's single friends. So again, society puts a lot of pressure on young people who are single. Here's a table that shows the people who have never married by age and sex, and this data is from 2016, the Census Bureau. You see that the top row is the total, age 15 and over, 35% of males and 29% of females who've never married. And then if you look at the ages, as we see the ages go up, there's a large percentage at 20 to 24 for men and women. 25 to 29, we start to see it go down by the 30s, and so maybe older people are delaying marriage, and we see that percentage go down as a result of the delay. Some singles may never marry. It's predicted to be a high number of never married people in the year 2030. So we're seeing again a trend towards people choosing to remain single. Societal attitudes are shifting toward more flexibility and changing that stereotype that singles are workaholics, or that they're lonely and that they can't commit. And so we're seeing a definite change in societal attitudes. And here's again the data from the Census Bureau, the current population survey 2017. That many Americans are marrying later, and so you see the age in 1890 for men, it was 26.1. That number has gone up. It declined a bit in 1950s to 22, but now has definitely risen to almost 30, 29.5. For women, it started at about age 22 in 1890, dipped down to 20 years old in 1950, 1960, and now has risen to about 27.4. So again, that estimated median age at first marriage has definitely showed a significant change. Now, singles are diverse, and so we're going to talk about the several kinds of singles. Those who are delaying marriage, the small percent who will never marry, and the currently unmarried who are divorced or widowed but maybe looking for new partners. And then we also have gay men and lesbians. So let's look at single adults in general. Being single can be either freely chosen or unintentional, as well as either enduring or temporary. So a person's inclusion in these categories can change over time. So first we'll have, take a look at voluntary temporary singles. And these are open to marriage. These are people who are open to marriage, but they place a lower priority on searching for a mate. Their education, their career, and active social life are more important to them. So men and women who live with each other but are not married may fall into this category. The voluntary stable singles, never married, they're satisfied with that choice. And this includes the divorced or widowed, and they don't want to marry. They're living with someone but don't intend to marry. Maybe these are the religious, so religious priests or nuns would fall into this category, the voluntary stable singles, or single parents not seeking a mate. Involuntary temporary singles are people who would like to marry and are actively seeking a mate. So this would include widowed, divorced, and single parents who would like to get married. The involuntary stable singles are people who would like to marry or remarry but haven't found a suitable mate yet. So these are primarily older, divorced, widowed, or never married people. They accept their single status as permanent. Also includes singles who may have a physical or a psychological impairments that limits their success in the marriage market. Now these boundaries are fluid for some. Singlehood is really constant because it's a choice, or they have little to trade in the marriage market. We look at single adults in later life. As people grow older, we have a tendency to become choosier as the pool of suitable mates actually decreases. There is a bit of a double standard. It still favors men. Women may be seen as over the hill, or men, seem much more mature or distinguished as they age. But older women are more likely than older men to remain single because maybe they're caring for relatives or aged parents or even taking care of their grandkids. There's some advantages and disadvantages of being single in later life. Older singles may be lonely and unhappy, so it's one of the disadvantages. Married people develop extensive networks of friends and family. Marriage may be satisfying, but it's also limited to some, to a person's freedom. On the plus side, never marrieds don't have to deal with the trauma of widowhood or divorce. They work, they date, they have hobbies, they volunteer, and they have lasting friendships. So the singles who are comfortable with this choice, their life choice, may enjoy activities, including eating out alone, as this young woman is doing. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at why more people are single. And the first thing we're going to consider are the macro level factors, where social scientists look at the more macro level, the larger scale societal influences. And the first is war. During times of war, marriage rates typically will drop. You would see that in the data as well, where we saw marriage rates spike before the war, but then also then really high rates of divorce or people not getting married during times of war. Also technology, women now through technology can control childbearing, and so having that ability to control childbearing influences women choosing to stay single. The social movements, the women's rights movement, the gay rights movement, also will influence giving women and gay more rights to choose their lifestyle. The economy, every time in times of depressions, or recessions, unemployment, people will postpone or delay marriage or choose to remain single or even cohabitate. Gender roles, also we see changes in gender roles, which means new attitudes about marriage and even self-sufficiency. When people feel they're self-sufficient, they may not choose marriage as a means of lifestyle. They'll delay the age at which they decide to marry. So these are some of the macro factors, those larger scale influences in a person's choice. Next, we'll look at the demographics. Macro level factors influence the delay in affecting people's decisions to marry, but also demographic shifts, the sex ratio, and the marriage squeeze. And then we'll look at some social class and non-marital childbearing issues. These factors help explain why we have such a large number of singles. So first, the sex ratio, and this is the proportion of men to women in a country or a group. So for example, if the ratio, if we look at the ratio, 100 means there are equal numbers of men and women. So a ratio of 110 means there are 110 men for every 100 women. In that case, there are more males than females. So in the US, the sex ratio is 105 at birth. In the 65 and older age group, the ratio is 77 because women tend to live longer than men. So when we look at those types of ratios, we look at the equivalent, the ratio of men to women. 100 being that they're equal numbers of men and women. 110 would mean that there are more men and women than 77. In that age group, we say there are more women than men. In some countries, the sex ratio is highly skewed because of female infanticide, which is the intentional killing of baby girls, because in those countries, in those cultures, there is a preference for sons. So we'll see a different ratio as a result of that. Then we have the marriage squeeze, and this is a sex imbalance in the ratio of available unmarried women and men. So, for example, millions of women in their middle or early years feel a marriage squeeze because men their age are looking for younger women. And because of that skewed sex ratio, countries like China and India and Korea and Taiwan and the Middle East face a scarcity of young single women. So this marriage squeeze is very evident in those places. Social class, with regards to social class, many unmarried couples postpone marriage because they feel that financial worries will increase tension and arguing and the chance for divorce. And many couples believe that they should first achieve a certain level of financial stability, save money for the long term, like buying a house and saving even money for a wedding. The likelihood of marriage increases with educational attainment. The more education means the more money. More income means fewer financial barriers to marriage. And another demographic influence is non-marital childbearing. Non-marital births are now very common, and many never married mothers are more likely to remain single because they can't find a good husband or a compatible marriage partner. They place a high priority on that mate who offers financial security. And even if they find someone, many potential mates or partners may be unwilling to make the financial or emotional connection to raise a non-biological child. Now, there are many benefits to getting married, but there are also benefits to remaining single. And we see in this table, some of the benefits of getting married is companionship, having a faithful sexual partner, the dependability and love and sharing of mutual interest, the pooling of economic resources, the social approval for settling down and starting a family, being part of something larger than oneself. On the other hand, the benefits of being single is that you have privacy, fewer constraints, more independence, varied experiences sexually, and even cohabitation. It could be exciting, changing lifestyle, meeting new friends with different interests who are inspiring, economic autonomy, having freedom from responsibility to care for a spouse or children, and the need for independence. Placing a higher priority on independence. So these are some of the the benefits of marriage compared to a single. So then why are more people single as a result of some more individual reasons? And if we look at the more individual reasons, the more micro level reasons, so many people are just waiting for that soulmate. For one, many singles sometimes delay marriage because they're waiting to meet that ideal mate or that one true love. For some, it's being independent, and one of the biggest benefits of singlehood is independence and autonomy and freedom, because single people can do pretty much what they please. They may enjoy, close relationships. They're delaying marriage. They can rely on friends and peers rather than a spouse for support and companionship and involvement in activities. Making a commitment with more never married men than women in all age groups except the oldest age groups. Making a commitment is an issue. And many men put off marriage because they see that marriage as a major economic responsibility that they may not want to make. And because cohabitation and parenting outside marriage are more accepted, singles of all ages feel less pressure to get married. So having children is another individual reason. Also, the fear of divorce, or prolonged years of conflict between parents can have a negative effect on young adults' perceptions of marriage. So many choose to stay single as long as possible because of the worry or fear of divorce. And lastly, being healthy and physically attractive. Emotional and physical health and physical appeal also affect singlehood. People with severe physical or emotional problems are also more likely to remain single longer or not marry at all. So here's just an illustration of the factors we just went over: the macro factors, the demographic variables, and the individual reasons that all lead to the postponement of marriage. Here we have a picture of single professionals, often working long hours to advance their careers. Often, however, they're perceived as being less burdened with home and family responsibilities, and can stay later and work longer hours because they have nothing to go home to. So now we'll look at some myths and realities about being single. And these are some myths and misconceptions about singlehood. Singles are selfish and self-centered. Is a myth, and singles in fact are more likely to visit parents and siblings than marrieds. Also, marriage tends to reduce community ties because married people are more concerned with meeting their own needs than singles are. Singles are well off financially is a myth. More singles than marrieds live at or below the poverty level. Marrieds can and often do combine incomes. Singles are usually lonely and miserable and want to marry. Not necessarily the case. Singles who are successful and happy are rarely lonely or miserable because they have other single friends who enjoy the same activities. And this is true especially for women who feel free from domestic responsibilities. Singles either are promiscuous or don't get any sex. While most singles don't fall into either of these groups, singles tend to report more sexual freedom, but marrieds report being happy with their sex lives and the frequency of sex, that have the higher frequency of sex than do singles. Singles children are doomed to life of poverty as well as emotional and behavioral problems. Yet, how children fare is largely dependent on parental resources, their income. So the quality of parenting and if there is alcohol or drug abuse is more of an issue. Singles worry about growing old and dying alone. In fact, singles are more likely than marrieds to be involved in family and community activities. They rarely worry about growing old and dying alone. So that myth about the old lady, dying alone in her house or apartment with cats is a myth. And lastly, there's something wrong with people who don't marry. The fact is, there's nothing wrong with being or staying single. Many singles simply believe that disadvantages of marriage outweigh the benefits. Now we'll talk about cohabitation. And the definition of cohabitation is the living arrangement in which two unrelated people are unmarried but live together and are in a sexual relationship. Now, there are two trends in cohabitation. One, the rates of cohabitation have risen, and some figures remain low, and that's because the Census Bureau doesn't really tabulate all unmarried couples in a home, only the person who rents or owns the home. And unmarried couples may not want to disclose that they're living together. Also, many believe to be in a common law marriage and may not identify as being an unmarried partner. The second trend is that cohabitation has become a pathway to marriage. So here we have the types of cohabitation. First, we have dating cohabitation, which is a living arrangement where people spend a great deal of time together and eventually decide to move in together. In this type of cohabitation, we have what is known as serial cohabitation, when typically young adults live with different partners over time. Next, we have premarital cohabitation, which is a living arrangement where a couple tests its relationship before getting married. They may or may not be engaged, but they plan to marry. Trial marriage is when people live together to find out what marriage might be like. This is similar to premarital, except the couple is less sure of the relationship. They may want to see how well they can deal with problems as they arise, or if they can deal with the personality, the finances, the interests, and any other issues that may develop. And the final type is substitute marriage, which is a long-term commitment between two people who don't plan to marry. And for many, it's an alternative to marriage. Now, these four types are just classifications. Cohabitation is somewhat more complex, especially when children are involved. So we have to ask the question, is cohabitation replacing marriage? And there's really little evidence that cohabitation is replacing marriage. For one, many young people don't believe in cohabitating, or they do not view it as a substitute for marriage. In fact, statistics show that cohabitating relationships are short-lived, with about 30% lasting only 5 years or more, compared to 78% of marriages. So who cohabits? And here we see some data of who cohabits. If you look at 1960, it's a very small number in millions, but 8.1 million in 2016. These figures are for opposite-sex unmarried partners, and it's based on census data of cohabitating couples in the United States. It's really increased dramatically. It's a diverse group when we think about it, who cohabits. About 34% of cohabitants are between the ages of 18 and 29 years old. The age is relatively young. 35% of cohabitants are between the ages of 30 and 44 years old. And approximately 26% of unmarried partners are 45 to 64 years old. Nearly 5% are 65 and older. And here are some of the reasons why. Those 40 and older may be divorced or widowed and want a close relationship but don't want to remarry. The older, those 50 and older, view their relationship as an alternative to marriage. They don't want to combine assets yet. And seniors don't want to give up spouses' pensions or alimony or any Social Security, which they may have if they, they may happen if they remarry. They may lose those benefits. When it comes to gender, by age 30, 74% of all U.S. women have cohabited. Daughters often follow a mother's lead, so if they've cohabited, they may be more likely to cohabitate themselves. If we look at race and ethnicity, because of the shortage of marriageable men, Many low-income cohabitating Black women don't want to marry because they believe their live-in partners will be unemployed or unfaithful or not responsible. Low-income whites and Hispanics, single mothers, don't marry if their partners are, for the same reasons. So cohabitation rates from high to low among racial ethnic groups are first Latinas, second are white women, third are Black women, and fourth are Asian women. When we consider social class, cohabitation is more common among people at lower education and income levels. Religion, the most religious Americans are less than half as likely to cohabit as those who seldom or never attend church, because they believe that premarital cohabitation is immoral and increases the odds of divorce. Therefore, religious values affect the cohabitation rates. Next, some of the benefits and costs of cohabitation. Now, this is a controversial subject because some people believe that living together is immoral, while others argue that it is a normal part of life. And as in any other relationship, cohabitation has both benefits and costs. First, the benefits of cohabitation include the following. Couples can pool their income, their economic resources, instead of supporting two households. The partners can dissolve the relationship without legal problems and leave an abusive relationship more easily. Also, postponing marriage lowers the likelihood of a divorce. The older we are when we marry, the better predictor of a stable marriage. It also helps people find out how much they really care about each other when you have to cope with unpleasant, realities of life. It increases the likelihood of receiving care that is usually provided by spouses, especially for those 65 and older. And finally, children also benefit with some of the economic advantages by living with two adult earners as compared to living with a single parent. Now, some of the costs of cohabitation is that cohabitants have a poorer quality of relationship and lower levels of happiness and satisfaction that are reported compared to married couples, both here in the United States and in Europe. People who cohabit often demonstrate more negative behaviors after marriage, like more controlling and being verbally aggressive and angry, than spouses who do not cohabitate. Cohabitation dilutes intergenerational ties. For example, the longer people live together, the less likely they are to give or receive help from parents, to turn to them in an emergency, and to be involved in extended family activities. Also, laws in the U.S. don't specify a cohabitant's responsibilities and rights, and this becomes an issue with child custody and trying to collect payments. Cohabitants are more likely to break up if sexual frequency is low compared to married couples. And most cohabitants can't receive a partner's social security funds, pensions, estates, and financial aid for children in college. So here we have a table that represents women with higher education levels who are less likely to cohabit. The higher the education level, again, women are postponing marriage because they're finishing their degree and so far, and then getting married later. Women with lower educations has a higher percent who cohabit. So we ask the question, does cohabitation lead to better marriages? Number one, we look at the cohabitation effect. So we accept the temporary nature and view cohabitation as an alternative to marriage. And there's also the inertia effect, where couples make decisions that make it more difficult to break up, pushing them more towards marriage. So, I also have to think about how does cohabitation affect children. And, the issue becomes, when it comes to child custody, trying to collect child custody payments, and are they better in a single parent household or living together in a cohabitating relationship where there are two incomes as well. cohabitation in the laws, where we see couples and their children have really little legal protection. So again, the laws will vary from state to state, but that is also a consideration. Many cohabitating couples are raising children from previous relationships as well as having children on their own while cohabitating. Then we're going to talk about same-sex relationships, same-sex couples. Regardless of our sexual orientation, most of us seek an intimate relationship with one special person. Before same-sex marriage became legal in all 50 states, couples leaned toward cohabitation. Gay and lesbian couples are diverse, and just like heterosexuals, homosexuals must really work out issues of communication and power and household responsibility with regards to love, support, and commitment. And most couples just want to have an enduring relationship. They're looking to have support from their partners, and they also are looking for relationship stability. And it's similar in both same-sex and opposite-sex relationships. So there are many similarities. If you look at the power and division of labor, the majority of gay and lesbian couples report having equal power in their relationship. When power is unequal, the older, higher earner and better educated partner usually has more power. So power is closely tied to the division of labor. When it comes to problems and conflict, gay and lesbian couples experience the same problems as heterosexual couples. Differences arise around, power, conflict over finances and inequality in the relationship and even possessiveness. Personal flaws, complaining about, persons, do they smoke? Do they drink? What is their personal hygiene? Intimacy, couples are similarly unhappy about intimacy and the demonstration of affection, and then physical absence. Partners are criticized if they're not present due to job or educational commitments. Racial ethnic variations, homosexual couples get less social support from family members, the greatest rejection coming from racial ethnic families. Although same-sex couples can now legally marry, many, like opposite-sex couples, are cohabitating rather than marrying. And many states have implemented clear programs and policies that support same-sex marriages. So we're seeing this internalized homonegativity, which is really struggling with negative feelings about homosexuality or sexuality. And so that's been a really struggle for many couples. Same-sex marriage has become legal in the United States in 2015. And here we have a table that was a study based on data reported in the decline of marriage and the rise of new families, reported by the Pew Research Center in 2010. The percent of Americans who consider these living arrangements or those cohabitating arrangements a family or not. And you can see the first column is a living arrangement. The second column is the percent that believe this is a family, and the right-hand column is the percent who believe this isn't a family. Interesting results.